March 1963. Harold Mitchum's hands shook as he signed the papers at Dodge City National Bank. Third loan extension in 8 months. The banker, Mr. Peterson, didn't smile anymore during these meetings. Just slid the papers across his mahogany desk and watched Harold sign with the detached interest of a man calculating foreclosure timelines. "You've got until November," Peterson said. "After that, Harold, I can't help you." Harold drove home in silence, watching his 200 acres of Kansas wheatland roll past the truck windows. 11 years he'd worked this farm, survived the drought of 54, the hailstorm of 58, cattle prices crashing in 61. But 1962 had delivered a trifecta. Drought killed half the wheat, Blackleg took 9 calves, and his youngest son broke his arm requiring surgery they couldn't afford. The numbers were simple and brutal. $470 monthly expenses, $320 in income, bleeding $150 every month with no reserve left. Martha was at the kitchen table when he walked in, ledger open, pencil moving across columns. She'd been recalculating for 3 days, like maybe the math would change if she tried hard enough. What did Peterson say? November. Martha closed the ledger. The Hendersons sold their back 40 last week. Bill's working nights at the meatpacking plant in Wichita now. Harold had heard. Bill Henderson had farmed for 23 years before the numbers caught up with him. Started selling parcels, then selling more, until there was nothing left but a bus ticket to the city and factory work. Their oldest son came through the kitchen grabbing his baseball glove. 14 years old and oblivious to adult financial terror. Harold watched him run out to where his brother was waiting. The boys would be in high school soon. College after that if Harold didn't lose the farm first. "There's got to be something we're not seeing," Martha said. Harold thought about that conversation for 2 days while spring planting consumed his daylight hours. The wheat had to go in despite everything. You didn't stop planting because the bank was breathing down your neck. But every bag of seed, every gallon of diesel felt like borrowed time. Saturday morning at the feed store, Harold was loading 50-pound sacks of cattle feed when Vernon Hughes pulled up in his dented Ford. Vernon farmed near Garden City, a lean 60-year-old who'd survived everything Kansas weather and economics could throw at a man. "Heard you got troubles," Vernon said, not unkindly. Harold shrugged. No point denying what everyone already knew. "You read those extension bulletins they got at the post office? College boys telling farmers how to farm?" Harold couldn't keep the bitterness out of his voice. Vernon laughed. "That's what I said in 57. Then my cousin Jim kept nagging me about this home economist out of Manhattan, woman named Dr. Morrison. So I read one bulletin just to shut Jim up." Vernon loaded his own feed sacks, then leaned against his truck. "Changed everything. We were spending $45 a month on groceries. Within a year, we were spending $12. Same quality food. Better, actually. How's that possible? You raising cattle, right? But you buy your beef at Safeway wrapped in plastic. You got good land, but no garden. You probably buy eggs and chicken too, even though your granddaddy's chicken coop is sitting empty behind your barn. Am I close?" Harold felt something shift in his chest. Vernon was exactly right. "My wife and I were doing the same thing. Modern convenience, we thought. Turns out modern convenience was bankrupting us. That extension bulletin showed us the math. We weren't poor. We were just stupid about money." Harold drove to the post office Monday morning before fieldwork. The clerk pulled out a cardboard box containing 30-some bulletins. Harold found 3 from Dr. Morrison's office and sat in his truck reading. The first bulletin opened with a number that made Harold's stomach drop. Average Kansas farm family in 63 was spending $35 monthly on food from stores. Larger families hit 50 or 60. But families producing their own food, garden vegetables, chickens for eggs and meat, milk cow, butchered beef, were spending $8 to $12 monthly, 70 to 80% reduction. Harold read it twice to make sure he understood. This wasn't about coupons or shopping sales. This was fundamental restructuring. He kept reading. Dr. Morrison detailed month-by-month systems, garden layout and planting schedules, chicken management, food preservation, equipment needs and costs. She wrote without academic pretension, acknowledging the work required while showing the returns. Martha read all 3 bulletins that night after the boys went to bed. When she finished, she sat quiet for a long time. This is what my grandmother did. My mother too, until we got the Frigidaire and decided store-bought everything was progress. Can you manage it? Harold asked. With everything else? Martha looked at the ledger still sitting on the counter. Can we afford not to try? Sunday they walked their property making plans. The chicken coop needed repairs but was structurally sound. The old garden plot had good drainage and southern exposure. They had a working hand pump well. The infrastructure was already there, just abandoned in favor of convenient poverty. Monday, Martha called the extension office in Dodge City. Turned out Dr. Morrison was presenting at the high school that very afternoon. Harold left fieldwork early. They brought both boys and found 43 other farm families crowding the auditorium. Dr. Morrison was gray-haired, direct, and opened with charts that made the audience shift uncomfortably. Farm income in Kansas from 50 through 62 had increased 11%. Household expenses had climbed 43% over the same period. "You're caught in scissors," she said flatly. "Income stable, costs climbing. Natural response is trying to earn more, grow more wheat, raise more cattle. But that requires capital you don't have and increases operating costs. There's another approach: decrease cash outlays by producing what you consume." She walked through case studies. Family outside Salina reduced monthly expenses by $215. Couple near Liberal cut annual outlays by $3,000. These weren't small adjustments. These were families choosing between keeping their farms or losing them. A man in back raised his hand. "This sounds like going backwards. My grandfather farmed this way because he was poor. Why would we choose it?" "Because your grandfather wasn't poor," Dr. Morrison said sharply. "He was solvent. There's a difference. Store-bought convenience feels like progress until the bank forecloses on your progress. I'm not suggesting you reject washing machines or tractors. I'm suggesting you distinguish between true conveniences and marketed conveniences that drain your bank account." Harold felt Martha's hand find his. They were both thinking the same thing. This woman understood. After the presentation, they waited to speak with Dr. Morrison. She took notes while Harold described their situation. 200 acres, wheat and cattle, November deadline from the bank, 150 monthly shortfall. "You have good fundamentals," Dr. Morrison said. "Question is whether you'll commit through the learning curve. First year will be brutal. You'll make mistakes, can tomatoes that spoil, butcher chickens inefficiently. But by year 2, you'll have working systems." She recommended starting immediately with chickens and spring garden, both relatively fast return. Beef butchering could wait until fall. She handed them additional bulletins including detailed chicken management and garden layouts for their zone. Driving home, their oldest son spoke from the back seat. "Are we poor now?" "No," Martha said. "We're being smart, finally." Harold ordered 50 pullet chicks from the Hutchinson hatchery next morning. Cost $18 including shipping. He spent evenings that week repairing the chicken coop, replacing rotted boards, reinforcing fence against predators. Martha started vegetable seeds in flats in the mudroom. The chicks arrived late March, peeping frantically in their ventilated box. Martha set up the brooder in the barn with heat lamps and starter feed. She checked them obsessively those first days, terrified of losing the investment to cold or disease. Harold worked the garden plot with their small tractor, breaking years of compacted sod, mixing in cattle manure. Martha laid out the garden following extension recommendations: tomatoes and peppers in full sun, root vegetables in deeper soil, beans on trellis Harold built from scrap lumber, squash in the corner where they could sprawl. By May, the garden was planted, and the pullets had adult feathers. Martha moved them to the coop. Harold built nesting boxes from old crates. They waited for eggs with the anxiety of people gambling their last chips. Early June, Martha found 3 eggs in the nesting boxes and actually called Harold in from the field. 3 eggs worth 21 cents. Weeks of work for 21 cents. But it was proof the system could work. Then everything started moving fast. By July, the hens were producing 20 eggs daily, more than their family could eat. Martha started selling a dozen eggs twice weekly to 3 town families for 35 cents per dozen, undercutting grocery prices. $12 monthly from egg sales covered feed costs with surplus. The garden exploded in July heat. Green beans faster than they could pick them, tomatoes by the dozen, zucchini requiring daily harvesting. Martha recruited the boys for picking duty. Both complained until Harold explained about November and Mr. Peterson at the bank. The complaints stopped. Martha started canning in early August. First batch was 14 quarts of green beans. She followed the bulletin instructions exactly, processing in the pressure canner at correct time and pressure. When the lids popped as they sealed, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: control. But August also brought problems. A storm knocked down 30 tomato plants. Beetles devastated the cucumber patch despite Harold's pesticide applications. The pressure canner's gauge started reading incorrectly, requiring a 40-mile trip to get it tested and recalibrated. 3 dozen jars of pickles spoiled from improper processing and had to be thrown out. "This is harder than working a job in town," Martha said one evening, exhausted from a 12-hour canning session. "Town job won't save the farm," Harold said quietly. She knew he was right. They kept going. By September, Martha had canned 230 quarts of vegetables despite the setbacks. The pantry shelves filled with jars representing food they wouldn't buy all winter. Harold built additional shelving in the cellar for overflow. September also brought the beef butchering. Harold contacted Vernon Hughes, who brought his son and son-in-law. 4 men worked through Saturday, slaughtering and processing a steer into standard cuts. Martha wrapped and labeled everything. Their used chest freezer, purchased for $65 from a farm auction, filled completely. Harold calculated 600 pounds of beef at 63 prices that represented $300 of meat they wouldn't purchase. But it also represented a Saturday of brutal physical labor and the loss of a steer they could have sold at market. "Are we actually saving money or just working ourselves to death?" Harold asked Vernon while cleaning up. "Both," Vernon said bluntly. "First year always feels like you're drowning. Year 2 gets easier, but if you quit now, you'll lose the farm for sure. Keep going and you might make it." October brought the first hard frost. Martha harvested remaining vegetables and stored root crops in the insulated cellar. Potatoes, carrots, beets, turnips would keep through March in the cool darkness. November 2nd, 1963. Harold and Martha sat at the kitchen table with the ledger, same table where they'd faced disaster 8 months earlier. Martha had tracked every expense meticulously. Food costs from April through October, $83 total. For a family of 4 over 7 months, less than $12 monthly. Before starting the system, they'd spent $35 monthly. The savings extended beyond food. Martha had made soap from rendered beef fat and lye, made cleaning supplies from vinegar and baking soda. They'd reduced propane by using the wood stove more, burning dead trees from their property. Total monthly expense reduction, $140. Harold looked at the numbers, then at Martha. They'd done it. Not just closed the gap, but created surplus. November 5th. Harold walked into Dodge City National Bank carrying the ledger. Peterson looked up from his desk with the expression of a man expecting bad news. Harold slid the ledger across the desk without a word. Peterson studied the numbers. His eyebrows went up. He flipped back through previous months, checking Martha's calculations. Finally, he looked up. "You did this in 7 months. 8 if you count March setup," Harold said. Peterson leaned back in his chair. "I've had 3 foreclosures this quarter. 2 more families are 30 days from it." He tapped the ledger. "You mind if I share these numbers?" Word spread fast through rural Kansas. By December, 2 families had visited the Mitchum farm to see Martha's pantry and hear about their systems. But then January 64 brought the crisis that almost destroyed everything. The cold snap hit the second week of January. Temperatures dropped to 18 below zero and stayed there for 9 days. The kind of cold that killed livestock and burst water pipes and made you question why anyone settled Kansas in the first place. Harold woke at 4:30 on the 4th morning of the freeze to check the cattle. He was halfway to the barn when he smelled it. Smoke. The chicken coop was on fire. He ran screaming for Martha. She called the volunteer fire department while Harold grabbed extinguishers and started spraying. The heat lamp had fallen into the bedding straw. By the time the fire truck arrived from town, the coop was fully involved. They saved the barn and the house but lost the chicken coop completely. More importantly, they lost all 75 hens. The ones that didn't burn had died from smoke or cold when they fled the coop into 18 below temperatures. Harold stood in the smoking ruins at dawn while the volunteer firefighters packed up their equipment. 75 laying hens at $2 each, $150 in birds, another 100 to rebuild the coop, plus all the egg income they'd been counting on. The math was devastating. "We're done," Martha said quietly, standing beside him in the grey morning light. "We can't come back from this." Harold wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. 8 months of brutal work. They'd finally gotten ahead, and now this. Vernon Hughes showed up that afternoon with his truck bed full of lumber. "Heard what happened. Got some friends coming tomorrow to help rebuild. Vernon, we can't afford you, sir." Didn't ask if you could afford it. Asked if you're quitting or fighting. Harold looked at Martha. She was crying, but she nodded. They rebuilt the chicken coop in 3 days with help from 6 neighboring families. Harold ordered replacement pullets from the hatchery, but the earliest delivery was late March. That meant 4 months without egg income. 4 months buying eggs from the store again. 4 months of expenses climbing back up while they waited for the replacement birds to mature and start laying. February 64 was the longest month of Harold's life. The wheat was dormant under snow. The cattle required constant care in the cold. The garden was frozen ground. And every week they were spending money they'd fought so hard to save. "Maybe we should sell the back 40, Martha said one evening, echoing the same words from a year earlier. Harold looked at the ledger. They'd burned through half their savings already. March would take more. If the replacement chicks had problems or didn't lay well, they'd be right back where they started. But he thought about Vernon and the other families who'd helped rebuild, about Dr. Morrison's data showing families who made it through the first year could sustain the systems, about his boys who'd learned to work and save instead of just consume. "No," Harold said. "We keep going." The replacement chicks arrived in late March. Martha set them up in the rebuilt brooder with the same obsessive care as the year before. By May, they'd moved to the new coop. By late June, the first eggs appeared. July 64, the hens were producing 22 eggs daily. Martha's egg route expanded to 5 town families. The garden produced even better than the previous year because Martha knew which varieties worked and had refined her techniques. Harold planted an extra half-acre based on what they'd learned about their consumption patterns. August canning went faster because Martha had systems now instead of figuring it out as she went. She processed 290 quarts by September. No spoilage because she'd learned the pressure canner's quirks. September, they butchered 2 steers instead of 1. Harold had identified which animals would bring the best meat value versus market value. The freezer filled completely, and they sold a quarter to Vernon's cousin at cost. By October 64, Harold sat down with the ledger again. Despite losing 4 months of egg production and spending $250 on the fire recovery, they'd still reduced annual expenses by over $3,000 compared to their pre-system spending. More importantly, the farm was profitable. The wheat crop had been good. Cattle prices had recovered. Combined with the expense reductions, they had actual surplus for the first time in 3 years. November 64. Harold and Martha drove to Dodge City National Bank. Peterson saw them coming and actually smiled. "Come to gloat?" he asked. Harold put the ledger on his desk. "Come to thank you for the extension. We're current on the loan. We'll stay current." Peterson studied the numbers, including the notes about the January fire and recovery. "You know what impressed me most? That you kept going after the fire. Most families would have quit, used it as an excuse to give up and blame bad luck." "Couldn't quit," Martha said simply. "Too many people helped us rebuild." Peterson leaned forward. "I'm sending 3 families to talk to you. They're where you were in March 63. Numbers don't work, running out of time. Can you help them?" Over the next year, Martha taught household production systems to 8 farm families in their area. Some succeeded, some quit after a few months deciding the work was too much. But the ones who committed reported the same results: 50 to 80% reduction in household expenses. By 67, Harold and Martha had operated their system for 4 years. The boys, now 17 and 15, ran most of the daily operations. Both planned to farm after college, using these systems from the start. The farm that had been bleeding $150 monthly in March '63 was now profitable every single month. Not dramatically, but consistently. They'd replaced equipment, repaired buildings, and built savings. Harold stood in the rebuilt chicken coop one evening in October '67, watching Martha collect eggs. 4 years since the desperate ride home from Peterson's office. 4 years since reading those extension bulletins in his truck. 4 years since choosing to fight instead of quit. The numbers were simple. They'd reduced monthly expenses by $140 through household production systems. Over 4 years, that was $6,720 in savings. But more than that, they'd kept the farm, raised their boys on their own land, maintained dignity and independence in an era when hundreds of farm families were losing everything. Martha walked over carrying the egg basket. "You remember what you said in March '63? That there had to be something we weren't seeing?" Harold nodded. "We were looking at the wrong problem. Thought we needed to earn more. Turns out we needed to spend less." Harold took the egg basket, and they walked back to the house together in the October twilight. Behind them, the chicken coop glowed with electric light. The garden lay dormant, waiting for spring. The pantry shelves were full of canned goods. The freezer held beef. They'd survived the scissors of stable income and rising costs by taking control of what they could control. The trick that cut their expenses in half wasn't simple. It required work, commitment, learning curves, and persistence through setbacks. But it worked, and that made all the difference. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and share it. This video is inspired by real events and historical practices common among American farm families from the 1930s through '70s. It is not intended to represent or offend any specific individuals or groups. Harold and Martha Mitchum are representative characters reflecting the real experiences of hundreds of American farm families who faced similar challenges and adopted household production systems during this era.